Hello and welcome back to When Sunday Comes, a podcast that aims to get into the heart of women's football and hosted by myself, Graham Falk. First and foremost, we're now on to episode 7, believe it or not. So I just wanted to say a wee thank you and continue to ask you to share it, like it, subscribe it, all that kind of stuff. But enough of that self-promotion. Let's introduce today's guest. A destroyer that is capable in midfield or defence. She was born in Pennsylvania, USA, and is a regular face for Championship side Durham. Welcome to the show, Dee Bradley. Dee, how are you? Are you okay?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I wanted to ask you how you felt about the description. I think I should always check that.
Destroyer, that is a big word, but I'll take it. I will take it.
It's a good descriptive word, I thought.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
it. Every podcast I've done, I've started with the same thing because I feel like on interviews, people don't do this enough. It's just after 5 o'clock on the 28th of November. How's your day been? What have you been up to?
Day's been good. We played Aston Villa last night, so we got in really late. So I started my morning a bit later than normal, but then I went to work for a bit. But I feel like I've been hit by a bus from yesterday's game, so I'm quite sore. But other than that, productive day, so can't complain.
How was the game? Because obviously Rachel Daly, as always, scoring again, really difficult to come up against, but good test against a good side.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would say Aston Villa is probably one of the best teams I've ever played against. Technically, and just their movement off the ball, on the ball was incredible. So it was a good test for us. Hopefully we tested them as well. And I think we turned up, which is nice to see.
And we rarely talk about men's football on this here, right? But there's a World Cup on. I'm English, you're American. England played America last week. We've all seen the fallout, but I'm kind of curious from a football fan's perspective. Did you watch it? What did you make of it?
Yeah, so we actually had all the girls together. So it was Thanksgiving on the Thursday. So we did a Friendsgiving on the Friday to watch England USA. And I've got to be honest, I was impressed with the US boys. They did well. I thought their energy was good. I thought they just kind of brought it. And I think it surprised a lot of England fans as well.
Yeah, I think so. I've made myself feel slightly better, but I think in the English teams, maybe the English women's team lionesses are catching up with the US, and maybe your men's team's catching up with us, and that's how I've kind of subsided myself and felt a little bit better about Fridays as well, if I'm honest.
I do agree with that.
We'll go through obviously as much of your career as we can. It's going to be difficult. It always is. You can never cover everything, but we'll start with the present. It's been, should we say, a funny old start for Durham by Durham standards, but what have you made of the opening months of the campaign?
Yeah, I think it's not obviously how any team really wants to start. I think we've went full time this year, which is a huge positive, and a dream come true in the sense of like a personal goal. But I think it takes time to kind of have things click. It's a big adjustment going from part-time to full-time. And I don't think results have necessarily gone our way, but there has definitely been progress made every single week. So as frustrating as it is that the results aren't necessarily going our way, I'm really proud with the progress that we're making as a team.
I was going to ask, with obviously you changing to full-time in the summer, like everyone looks at it as a positive because it is ultimately, and in the long run, it's always going to be a positive. But what actually are the challenges from going from part-time just to full-time sort of over a summer?
Yeah, I mean, well, with on top of that, you have 5-6 new players. So with that, that's new team chemistry, new team dynamic, everything. But we got new coaches this year as well. So it's now applying their philosophy to what we maybe not be used to in the past. And we have more time to do so, yes, but sometimes it people think it's going to click automatically, and it does take a few months for it to click. And I do think it's coming for us. I just think we just need to be a bit more patient. And it is showing now. We beat Coventry. We played really well against Villa last night. So it's getting there. It is getting there.
I mentioned it sort of off air before, but I was obviously down at Durham this year, managed to see beat Man United on penalties. We haven't even touched on that result yet, and there's big evidence of obviously what Durham can do. But you scored literally the last kick of the game, completely ruined my match report, which you know, really difficult to change that one in the last few seconds, but I'm sure you won't mind. Is that an example of exactly what Durham are about? And I don't just mean in terms of the way you played, in terms of the grit that you showed right up until literally the last second in that game.
Yeah, I mean, since my arrival at the club, Durham has been known as the team that are physical, that are the ones that don't give up, the ones that fight till the end. And that was what I was told before I got to the club. And getting to the club, it's like, oh yeah, this is real. And there's been quite a few games where we've just kept going and been relentless, and it's paid off for us. So I do think a big part of the club is wearing that badge with pride and fighting until the last whistle is blown.
Yeah, it really felt like that as well. And I think it's probably a massive testament to Durham that you had Man United fans all over Twitter just going, why always Durham? Why always Durham? Because it's not just the once, it's the twice. And obviously you scored in the game last year. But I think what it probably boils down to for me from the outside looking in it is characters. And it's very rare that I'm intimidated, but Sarah Mack is quite an intimidating character, even when you're interviewing her. And I was desperately trying to say the right thing to impress her. And I think I got away with it. But that's just one character in the dressing room. Who are the ones that you go to for advice? Obviously, you're still young, you're still growing, you're still learning. There's a lot of experience and a lot of characters.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live with Beth Heppel. She is an icon in the women's championship. I live with Becky Saliki, and the two of them, I learn more from them every day than I have in the past 18 years of my career. Like constantly talking about football in a good way and in a way that helps my game and helps their game. You can't, like Sarah McFadden, she is an absolute beast. Her presence on the pitch alone is just something that I'm always grateful for, and I'll always learn from her when she's on the pitch. We have Sarah Wilson, the captain. She's unfortunately not been able to play much this year, but her presence alone is just huge for us. So, I mean, I could go on to everyone on the team, because they really do bring something different and something important to make this club work. But yeah, I'm quite lucky to have quite a few role models on this team.
Quite funny. I read I think it was after the Man United game that someone said it was someone who didn't want Durham to win. I think Man United fan said Beth Heppel corner should be outlawed because of the should we say the pinpoint accuracy. But yeah, like there's so many names you've mentioned there that I think not just icons of Durham, as you say, the championship as well, and names that I think have been recognised for years and still years to come as well. I mean, I know Sarah Mack's not been on for what, 34, 35, but she's shown no signs of slowing down anytime soon, which is fantastic. But I think one thing I really like about Durham as a team, and when I'm watching you play, like I said before, is win, lose, or draw, I always feel like the other team know that they've been in a game, which obviously indicates that team spirit and willing to fight for each other is huge. And that's something you can really recognize in Durham, even when you're going through tough times, which effectively you are at the time of speaking. But how good is that dressing room just to be in terms of like when your backs are against the wall?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have standards in the team. And when those standards aren't being met, it's important to say so. And when we don't feel like we've met our standards as a club, as a team, it's said, and we hold each other accountable. We make sure every person turns up to training. And I think, yes, a Sunday obviously is the most important day because you want the 3 points from it, but the days leading up to it, I mean, you have to make sure training is competitive. You have to make sure people are making the right pass and picking their head up when they should be. And it's just little details. And I think if you're going to go back to the full-time bit, getting those little details is going to take time. And since we've gone full time in the summer, we've kind of slowly crept up to those points. But yeah, I mean, the dressing room in itself, I mean, it's incredible. I've never experienced anything like it, really. We have each other's backs when we need it. But like I said before, we push each other when we need it as well. And I think that shows on the pitch.
Touched on before about the new management coming in. Obviously, I think people are aware of the structure, and this is completely my own selfish question that I think only I really care about. But Grant Scott is one of my favorite people on the planet, someone I've worked with myself. Fantastic coach, not just a fantastic bloke. How much have you enjoyed working with Grant?
Oh, I've loved it so far. I hope he's enjoying it as well, because I think I can speak on behalf of everyone that we respect him big time. He's been incredible for us. The partnership between him and Claire has been amazing. And honestly, some of the stuff we've learned this year is so like refreshing. So I've really, really enjoyed it.
I absolutely love Grant. So Grant, if you are listening, I do love you very much.
Yeah.
I think it filters out to the fans, that team spirit you spoke about before. Absolutely. And I think we touched off air like how important those fans were in getting you over the line against Man United. And it's not the only time. Like I speak to people all the time and I mentioned that and they went, oh, that's just every week. That's just constant with Durham. That's all the time. And I think when I was speaking to Sarah about those fans, she said, sometimes we thought, the bigger crowd was coming just to see the Lionesses, but they actually really got behind us and Durham. And there was almost like a point where it was like venomous so much, which is great. I quite like that. But it seems to be a bond and a regular occurrence between the fans, and you can really feel that connection even just from the online presence. For you personally, how good is that bond between club fans and players at the moment?
I think it's huge, huge. I think since I've moved here, I've never really had the encounter of fans, so I didn't know what to expect. But I think I think my expectations now are so high because of the fans at Durham, because they're so passionate. They always have our back, no matter win, loss, draw. And they are so supportive of everything that we do. We'll go sign stuff after a game and all the kids will remember your name and you're trying to remember all their names. So it's just like a really nice and refreshing feeling to go to them after the game and know that they'll always have our back. So it's a good atmosphere to be at.
And I think as well, you can really see the work that the club's putting in and connecting the fans as well. I think, as I said before, we touched on sort of off air, but the idea that in the middle of the program, there's an autograph page, there is a email sent out thanking the fans from a different player every week personally. And then after that as well, you've also got, I think it's a tweet that comes out to say how you can meet the players, how you can connect with them and stuff like that. And I've got to be honest, there's no other club doing that. There's got to be I think that just shows the bond between not just club staff, players, fans, also that maybe the media men in the background are doing a fantastic job as well and connecting everything together, aren't they?
No, absolutely. And I know you know Mark, but Mark has been outstanding for us. He's always on the front foot. He's always looking to do something more and make sure everyone feels included, had a good time at our games. And I think, yes, you want the result, but also if they have a good time and they're at a good atmosphere and they've enjoyed their time, they're going to want to come back and bring their kids. And I think that's so important because if the kids want to come back, then it hopefully inspires them to want to play at this level when they're at the age to. So yeah, we're so lucky to have the team that we do, and Mark does incredible to get them to come back and keep it going.
Absolutely. And I think, I remember the first games I went to and my dad took me outside of Roker Park at Sunderland and I met the players and they were my heroes and I still remember them. And some of them were really awful and I would probably hate them in modern day life, but meeting them, they were my heroes as a kid. And I think essentially, we're talking about inspiration and being able to watch female footballers on the pitch and, see being a women's footballer as a profession. But I think also meeting them and having your own heroes and realizing that, you can meet these people, they're just normal people, and this is who you aspire to be as a person, and all that kind of stuff goes with it. It's just nice to see, I guess. And I've pinched a few Mark's ideas, so thanks very much, Mark. Going back to your childhood, obviously, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but your dad was footy mad. What are your earliest memories of growing up and playing football as well and getting into it?
Yeah, my dad was, he's a big Manchester United supporter, so we grew up supporting them through and through. But I remember on the weekends, if we had a morning off of football, which was quite rare, we'd watch the Premier League. We'd put on any game that we could possibly get on. So our weekdays, our weekends were consumed by football. But I have a twin brother and then two younger brothers. So I just grew up playing with the boys. I luckily had a girls' team that I was playing with as well, but if I could play with the boys, I chose to play with the boys over the girls just because it was more competitive. It was more fun to kind of be the only girl in that. And I liked playing with my twins. So it was a lot of fun.
In terms of playing football, I think we've all had, I have a memory of playing football, but I wasn't very good at it. I'm good at supporting it. I'm maybe good at presenting it. I'm not very good at playing it, and I'm still not very good at 36. But who's the first person that I kind of noticed you playing and going, actually, Dee's got talent. She's not just enjoying herself. She's got a bit of talent. Let's take this further. Who was like the first coach or the first person to notice that?
To be honest, my dad was my coach for the longest time up until I was about 12, 13. And he kind of sat me down and was like, look, if you want to pursue football, you have my full support, but now's the time to kind of take that next step. And so I went to a travel team that was about 45 minutes away, and we trained 4 nights a week. We played sometimes 2 games a weekend. So talk about the hours and miles in the car and everything. But I had a bit of a rough start with them because the level was just night and day different. We were traveling all over the country to play football. And then I had a coach, Sean McCafferty, who I couldn't speak highly of, and Johnny Rhodes. And after I played with them, they kind of gave me the confidence that, you know what, if I put this work in and listen to my coaches, I can play at any level that I want to. And so I would say they were probably the 2 coaches that kind of changed my mindset of wanting to play as long as I can and as far as I can in terms of levels in women's football.
I've spoke a lot to British players, and we talk about who they looked up to, and they tend to go towards a male footballer, because 15, 20 years ago, I could be honest, probably women's football wasn't really on the map as it is now. Well, nowhere near. But in the US, I think it's well known that we've seen superstars in terms of football for a long, long time. Like, there's millions of names we could recall going back 20 years. Obviously, you grew up in the US as opposed to the UK. So we're starting to see that change now. How much did that benefit you in the US, though, that change that we're going to be seeing in the UK, being able to view a woman as a professional footballer and see it as a viable profession?
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, if you were to ask some of the players that I play with now, I guarantee 80% of them would say a men's footballer would be their idol, and they grew up watching a male footballer. But for me, I had Mia Hamm, I had Abby Wambach, I had Alex Morgan, and talk about big names and incredible players. So yeah, it was really cool. I met Mia Hamm. I felt like I was a kid in a candy shop when I met her. It was unreal. But I'm lucky to say that I had a women's footballer to idolize, and I had a family friend. She played at University of Virginia, Sinead Farley, and she played all in the NWSL, and she's an absolute legend. So I got to idolize her as well. So yeah, I think I've been quite lucky to have so many women's footballers as my idols and kind of push me and say, you know what, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And it's nice to see that here there's the Lionesses to now look up to. And I think they've always been there, but now that they've won the Euros and everything, they have that platform of, yeah, if you put the work in, put your mind to it, you can absolutely get to that level.
I think it's quite funny. We're probably going to get a generation of young girls and young boys that either end up going on to play for the national team or end up being king or queen of the jungle, depending on which TV show they watched. But yay, Jill Scott, by the way.
Yes.
Massive yay for me. In terms of those global superstars you mentioned before, I mean, there's the American players were the first women's players I came to. Your likes of, you touched on Alex Morgan there massively for me, 100%. Karen Bardsley, obviously from an England perspective, was one of my heroes growing up. Jill Scott, we just mentioned there, though. They were the players that got me into it, but I was an adult by that point. When you were young, who were the specific players you looked up to as not just role models from a perspective of I can make it as a professional footballer, but the ones that you maybe wanted to emulate or model your game on?
That's a good question. So it's actually kind of contradicts what I said earlier, but being a Manchester United supporter, my dad was a massive Roy Keane fan. And
Great
so we grew up watching Roy Keane, and our family number 16 for Roy Keane. And I loved his grit. I loved his personality on the pitch. He was a maniac at times, don't get me wrong, but I loved his absolute passion on the pitch. Like when he stepped foot on that field, there was no stopping him, regardless of who he was playing in that. So I would say he was probably he definitely played a big role in my playing style, in mindset, in a lot of the things that I still carry with me today.
It's funny, that explains so much, Dee. That explains so much. Just from watching you play, I won't go any further. But yes, it does explain a lot. Obviously, you did spend time in the US college system. What are the big differences for you between sort of the US and the academy system? Because obviously, I think you came to Durham as part of the I can't think even of the word here, scholarship program. But
Yeah.
what are the differences between sort of the two?
At university at home, it is massive. The women's soccer, really. There's 330 programs that it ranges from Division 1 to Division 3, and I was lucky enough to go to Old Dominion and play there. It's extremely competitive, and the level that I played at, we played people from Texas, places like Florida, all over. But the difference here is that I think you can kind of just walk on to the team, where you kind of have to get scouted to play at home. And so you go to tournaments all over the country to get seen by coaches. Just say I reach out to you and you're the Old Dominion coach. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm guaranteed a spot on the team. They'd have to want me as well. So it's a lot of dedication, a lot of football required to kind of get seen. But yeah, it's an amazing experience, and anyone that can get the opportunity to go to it, I highly recommend. But we mainly play our season in a span of 3.5 months. Whereas here they kind of play throughout the year, which I won't go so into. But it should be longer. But it is incredible, the experience, and I highly recommend it.
As a teenager playing for Old Dominion, I'm probably asking you a really long-winded question here that's probably unanswerable in some ways, but what was the biggest thing you learned about yourself as a youngster when you started playing regular games, traveling with the team and all that kind of stuff, and how did that shape you moving forward?
That's a good question. I think growing up, I always knew I wasn't the most technical player. I wasn't the quickest player. I wasn't all around. I wouldn't have been like, wow, who is that player? But I knew that football was my passion, and that if I really, really wanted to play for as long as I can and for at the highest level possible, I had to work really hard. So I think from a young age, I always had that kind of fight in me to be like, well, if you don't think I can do it, I'm just going to prove you wrong, kind of thing. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing I learned at a young age that still to this day kind of carries with me. Even now, yes, I'm getting a good run of games in, but I never take the previous game into the next week. We get in on a Tuesday, we start training, and I have to prove throughout that week that hopefully I should be on that pitch again. So I think it's just a mindset of, okay, you've done well, but it's still not over yet. And that's definitely something I learned at a young age.
It's quite interesting you touched on you were the most technical player, and I think a lot of the time people look at the De Bruynes, the Messis, all these players that can do these crazy things. But I once spoke to a footballer who said, I always get referred to as a hard worker. He's like, but could I pass a ball? Yep. Could I put in a good tackle? Well, my tackle's good. Yep. Did I win balls in the air? Yep. Did I lead my team well? Yep. Do you think that sometimes that doesn't get centered on enough? Doing the basics right and doing it to your best of your ability makes you a very, very good footballer. Like Roy Keane was talented, but that was because he did a lot of the basics incredibly well.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of the players that do the basic things consistently kind of go unnoticed. I think a lot of football is based on statistics and how many goals you score, how many assists you have, and that is incredible if players can do that. And I give my utmost respect to all those players. But I do think there's a lot of players that are fantastic players, but maybe don't get the respect or acknowledgement that they should. But yeah, it's just because they do the basics. But then if you miss that player, or if they're injured or this and that, then you kind of see what they bring.
Absolutely. I think there's always a player in one team where most of the fans might be like, oh, I don't mind if he gets replaced. Then he gets moved out and they go, oh God, we'll miss him, or we miss her. Like, you can just see it so much.
Yeah.
When you were at Old Dominion, I think it was in your final year, your senior year, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not great with American timeframes. But you suffered an ACL injury, and it's become a bit of a habit here, a bit of a theme, because I think almost every player I've had on's suffered the injury, unfortunately. I'm quite curious, because I think a lot of the time we speak about either one side or the other. But what does that injury do to you, sort of physically and mentally?
Yeah, no, your thing was correct. I did it my senior year. It was really, really hard, and I would say more mentally than physically. I did it my last year, so I did it in the beginning of the season. So I then ended up doing an extra year at college. And my knee was not right the whole time I was playing, but I said nothing. And then come the springtime, I went back and got another scan and ended up doing the same knee twice. So that was really, really hard. And I think if I didn't have such a good support system, I don't know if I would be where I am today. So I think if you get that, if God forbid that happens to anyone, I think it's so important to have good support around you, because yes, you can do all the things physically, but it's such a long process that you're going to have more lows than highs at times. And it's just getting yourself through that and making sure that you feel loved and supported, because mentally it can be really, really draining at times.
You know, when you do the ACL injury, it's weird as a fan. You kind of go, oh, ACL. You can feel it as a fan. Do you feel it as a player? Is there like a specific pain, or do you just kind of have that feeling like that's my ACL immediately?
It's so strange, because it's every footballer's worst nightmare. But for me, when it happened the first time, I was like, oh no, I've just done my ACL. And people are like, no, 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 it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I was like, no, I've just done it. And it's just a gut feeling, I think. But the second time, I had no idea that it was my ACL again. So I think I was more devastated the second time, sorry, because I just didn't see it coming. But yeah, the first time I knew, they were like, no, let's wait till the scan. And I was like, no, I don't need a scan. I know exactly what it is. But yeah, it was hard.
From a perspective of that injury in particular, how intrigued are you by like that in-depth research that they're doing on the amount of ACL injuries that are being suffered in women's football? Because I don't know if it's like, do you remember that time in 2016 when it felt like every celebrity was dying? It feels like that with women's footballers and ACLs at the moment.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's just because we're concentrating on it more, but I mean, Beth Mead's just done hers. Yep. Joe Love did hers last year. There's so many players you could list off, and there's tons of research being put into it. And you're beginning to see that there's a specific time frame, I think, when a woman's ACL is more susceptible to being ruptured or damaged. But how intrigued are you by all of that as someone who's obviously suffered the injury?
Yeah, no, as soon as I did it the first time, I was always afraid of it. So you would never really like look it up, because you're like, oh, if I look it up, it will happen to me. But it's not obviously the case, but it's just something that you don't want to get into your mind. But I do think it's actually more important to educate yourself on it. And maybe there's different ways that you can't guarantee it not tearing at certain times. However, I think there's ways to prevent certain moments happening. So I think that's really important to educate yourself on that. But I mean, Emma Hayes has done wonders for it, and it's she's doing a big study with Chelsea, and I think it's towards the end of the study that they're at now. But yeah, it's huge. I think what she's doing for the women's game in terms of ACL prevention is a good step forward, because I think in the past it was like, oh, we'll just kind of, if it happens, we'll deal with it. But I do think there's so many other ways that you can kind of prevent that injury from occurring, and it being so frequent as well.
It really feels like that. And I think Emma Hayes I'm pleased you mentioned Emma Hayes, because I always feel like Emma Hayes is a person that we won't know what she's did until she retires and she's no longer there. Yeah. Which is sometimes, I'm sure she won't care. But like at the same time, I think the stuff she's putting in, just little things like that in women's football is so important. In football in general is really important, let alone women's football. But this is probably a really difficult question. I know you sort of half touched on it before, but looking back at the time you had those injuries, maybe so much the second time, what did that teach you about yourself?
Yeah, it taught me that I need to kind of get over myself. It sounds really, really harsh, but yes, I can feel sorry for myself and be like, why me? Why me? But at the end of the day, there's so many people that one are going through so much worse. And two, there's so many players that have gone through this numerous times and have gotten through it. So why can't I? So the second time around, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can mentally do this whole process again. I don't know if I can do it really at all. But then after a few weeks, I was like, right, okay, if I don't try this, I know for a fact that I'll regret it for the rest of my life. So I was like, right, no more feeling sorry for yourself. You're allowed to have a down day when you need a down day, but it's time to get to work. And I did that. And to be honest, even if Durham didn't work out, I would have been really proud of myself to kind of just get through it. But luckily, they've kept me around. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you gotta push through it, and it's really, really hard. And I would never tell anyone it's not hard, but it's just kind of finding that fight inside you again.
We've talked a lot about Durham, and we've talked a lot about the mental side of the game. And one thing I probably never touched on is Pennsylvania is quite a different place to Durham. Obviously, Durham is far nicer, no offense.
Of course.
But that must be quite hard as well. I mean, I can't just imagine, I'm from near Durham, and I can't imagine just, it was tough for me coming to Glasgow 10 years ago. And then if I just went to Pennsylvania or wherever, like I wouldn't just fit in, let alone have to mentally put myself into a team and all that kind of stuff. Like, what were the sort of challenges from it, and where do you find yourself now with the place in general?
Yeah, it's quite ironic because I'm the biggest homebody of all time. So it does not make any sense why I moved across the world to play football. But I love football so much and I want to push myself that I know home will always be there. But luckily I had two former teammates from university that I played with. So I knew two people when I moved here. So that helped big time. However, I moved in the midst of COVID. So that did not help in terms of socializing, going to see the country, going to see different places. So that was quite tough. However, I will say that these girls at Durham have made me feel welcome since the day I have arrived. Sorry, they are some of the most incredible people I've ever met, and so I'm really, really lucky to be surrounded by this group because they've made it so easy for me to be away from home. And I tend to call them my family because they pretty much are. So I'm lucky.
It does have that, Durham. I know we've touched on it, but it does have that family atmosphere about it. Like, it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that. And you could say, oh, everyone would say that kind of thing, but you can feel it actually with Durham. You know for a fact it's there. It does feel like a family. Like, that's why you can see everyone has each other's back when it comes to the games, and that's what you see. One last thing on Durham before I give you the standard two last questions, which people keep telling me are the hardest ones. I don't think they are, but apparently they are. Obviously, you joined the scholarship program. As someone from around that area, I obviously am aware of that, and I've known a lot of players that have gone into it and played with Sestria and so on and so forth. But what attracted you to Durham and that program in particular when you first saw it?
Yeah, so I think I was drawn to Durham as well because I knew two players when I was there. So any game that was on the FA Player or anything, I would just watch it because I was home because I was recovering from my second ACL. So I was so intrigued by Durham, and I love the fact that they weren't connected to a men's team. Couldn't tell you why, but it's something about that. I was like, that is just so cool. I think that is incredible. I looked up different places in the Northeast and I was like, this place is beautiful. I love it already, and I'm not even there. But in terms of the university, I think it is incredible. I think the facilities that they have is amazing. They built like a new, I don't know when it was built, to be honest with you, but the facility that we train at and play our games at, amazing. There's 4 turf fields, there's field hockey fields, there's grass pitches beside it. It's amazing. So we're quite lucky to be at where we're at. And we're lucky that we can kind of work hand in hand with the university. And I think education is such a big part in everyone's life. For me, it was kind of a no-brainer.
Final 2 questions, apparently the hardest ones. This will be the easier of the last 2. I don't think they're that hard, but apparently they are. Who's the toughest opponent you've ever faced?
Toughest opponent. It's a tough question because it's on the spot. So I can understand why that's a tough question. I would say Alessia Russo for United. And to be fair, Dolly for Aston Villa, when we played them last night, she is phenomenal. So I would say probably those 2.
Russo must be quite an interesting one because I don't know, as a fan, I've never seen a player like Russo in terms of her stature, the way she goes. Like the goal she got against Arsenal, I haven't seen a goal like that for ages, just someone just sticking their head in the way. And I don't know why I haven't seen that before, but the way she plays, that kind of a stature on the pitch, it must be, and she's fast. That must be a nightmare to defend against.
Yeah, in terms of technical ability, I mean, you can see how good she is, but until you are up against her, her physical strength is something out of this world. And she is not afraid to put, like you said, put her head in any position to score a goal. So I think as a defender, and even when she drops into the pockets as a midfielder, you're like, do I go or do you go? Or she's just so clever with what she does. So yeah, everyone could see at the Euros, but she is some player.
She's doing all right.
Yeah, she's doing all right. Yeah.
She's not doing too bad. And then apparently the hardest question, I got wrong off Jess Park for even asking this, and she couldn't even decide on it. But there you go. Your ultimate 5-side team, and it can include a goalkeeper if you want, and it can include yourself if you want, but it doesn't have to.
Okay. Right. I'm going to choose Beth Heppel because she's a little baller. I'm going to choose Jordan Nobbs because, again, another baller. Defender. Who do I want as a defender? Oh, this is really hard on the spot. I'm kind of drawing a blank. I'll do Alex Scott.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do. We'll throw in. Oh gosh, is that 4? Sorry.
3 so far, unless you include yourself.
So Beth, Jordan, Alex Scott. Oh, this is so stressful. You know what it is? I'm going to put Becky in there because I think if I didn't say Becky, she'd probably cry. So she'll be my other defender. And then my striker, I'll do Marta for Brazil because she's incredible. Yeah. And she's the first person that came to mind. So we'll say her.
Record speaks for herself.
Yeah.
Dee, really lovely chatting to you. Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And good luck for the rest of the season as always. I'm sure I'll be down before the end of the season, but appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.